made me into that cartoon, so I had to get a hat image. All right, well, thank you all for coming.
Thank you for hosting.
Yeah, we'll get started a little early because I think probably most people are here and people will pop in online here shortly. So this will be our last NED Talk for 2025, but there are plans in the works for NED Talks for 26. If you have any people you know that you think would be good presenters, we've had everything from wetlands ecology, spring migratory birding, moths, which was really fascinating. We have one about Ottawa County Parks, and then this is our last one here with Gale. This, I have to say, is the one I've been most excited about. Gale helped us when you saw us wandering around out front, all of the native plants out there. She helped us get those all together, and we planted, I don't remember, hundreds of them out there. So this will be a great one. But yes, if you have any other topics that you'd like to see hit for 26, hit me up and let me know, and I'd be happy to reach out to them. We're always looking for more topics that involve nature in the area. So I'll turn it over to Gale. You guys have all been chatting with her already, so she probably doesn't need much of an introduction, but she's the fabulous native plant lady.
I guess I'd rather be a crazy cat, native plant lady than a crazy cat lady. Or
I'm kind
not
of
such a
both.
bad thing. All right. So if I'm going to change
that, you should just be able to.
Yeah,
you should just be able to click
okay.
here, yeah.
All right. So some people ask me, well, why should I worry about native plants? You know, they're weeds. They're in my backyard. Well, maybe not. They're not in your backyard, because a lot of times what you actually have in your backyard are non-native invasive things that you presume are native just because they've been there and you've seen them over and over and over, like chicory, dandelions. People think if it's in your yard and it's growing all by itself, it's native, and that's not true. So over the past century, urbanization has taken a lot of our really good ecologically productive land and it's turned into lawns and gardens. Just think about all the people that want to build a house back in the woods, to live in the woods. Oh, what a dream, I want to have a cabin in the woods. But they don't think about all the native plant communities that they're disrupting when they build that cabin in the woods. And unfortunately, when people go to landscape around their homes, they're going to your regular average garden center, they're going to Lowe's, they're going to Walmart, Menards, wherever, and they're just buying whatever they can find, which 99.9% of the time is not going to be a native plant. If you do find a native plant at places like that, many times they've used pesticides on them, or they're a cultivar of a native plant, which is not exactly the same thing. So I want to address some of that. Oh my God. All right, sorry.
No, that's okay.
I keep wanting to touch that mouse.
If you do left click on that, it'll work.
Left click,
Yeah.
okay, thank you. I'm used to a clicker. Okay, so all these exotic plants that you're finding in your garden centers, they sever the food web, because most of the time, things that are native pollinators can't use those plants. And when you think about these gorgeous little petunias down here in the corner, they're pretty. When you buy them, you're buying them for yourself. You're not really buying them for the pollinators. You might lie to yourself and tell yourself, or maybe you're just not informed, that these are going to be great for the butterflies and all those little things that like flowers, but not so. Because most of the time, the trade-off on these cultivated things is a loss of pollen and nectar. So what you're basically putting out there is something that might tempt them, but is really not going to give them much of a reward. And this is a non-native petunia, so it's an annual here in Ohio, and you're going to have to keep replanting it. That doesn't make any sense to me either. And also, nothing is going to host on this. I'm really big on trying to encourage people to plant things that critters host on. If you're not familiar with that term, that means probably something you're familiar with. Think of a monarch and milkweed. Monarchs lay their eggs on milkweed. The caterpillars eat the milkweed. They grow to maturity, or grow big enough to make their chrysalis, and they do the chrysalis thing, and then they turn into a beautiful butterfly. But that's where their dependence on that milkweed stops. So when you plant milkweed for monarchs, you're not planting it for the butterfly as an adult, you're planting it for the butterfly as a caterpillar, as a larva. And so, if you want to have petunias, all right, now.
Oh, no, it's not there.
There, okay. If you want to have petunias, this is a native petunia that you can plant that's going to come back every year. It looks like a petunia, not as big and fancy a flower, no, but it's a very nice little plant. It makes a great ground cover. There are a lot of state parks here in Ohio that are starting to use this plant as a ground cover around their signage out in front of the park. And this is a true host plant because the caterpillar of the buckeye butterfly will eat the leaves of this. So the buckeye butterfly lays its eggs on this plant, the caterpillars eat the leaves, and then they go through their metamorphosis and then turn into a buckeye butterfly. But this is a really pretty little plant. Why not use this in your landscape instead of a non-native petunia that's really not going to do anybody any good?
You also don't have to water it as much.
That is true.
I have some back here, and I planted some at my house from back here, and I just love them.
They're wonderful. They're a wonderful little plant. And you can, if they pop out in the lawn, you can mow over them, and then you'll get the incredible sight of seeing these big butterflies landing down in the grass, and you'll find yourself saying, what is that butterfly doing in the grass? Well, what it's doing in the grass is hitting that little tiny hairy wild petunia that's down in the grass. And if you go places like Serpent Mound in southern Ohio, you will see this particular petunia all over in the grass around Serpent Mound. And that was where I first encountered the butterflies in the grass phenomenon. Because I was trying to figure out what the heck those butterflies were doing. And as I got closer, I realized they were mowing the lawn, mowing these little petunias off, and the butterflies were so adamant about getting into those flowers that they didn't care if they were landing in the grass. They just wanted that flower. So it's a pretty cool little plant. And here's the buckeye of which I speak. So you can see the beautiful eye spots on the butterfly, and that's how it gets its name, the buckeye. And the caterpillars are kind of spiky little dudes. They look kind of gothic, but they've got a little bit of orange on them that kind of reflects the color they're going to become when they become a butterfly. And they're everywhere. Like at my place, I've had people stop in at the nursery and just act amazed because they'll say, I've been looking for buckeyes. I love to watch butterflies, and I've been looking for buckeyes all summer long, and I haven't seen one. And then I come here and you have them everywhere. What's your secret? I just smile and say, hairy wild petunia. Just if you plant it, they will come. If you plant the plant that they host on, they definitely will show up. And by the way, this buckeye is feeding on mist flower, which you have plenty of mist flower blooming around here out in the around the parking lot.
It's in the bouquet back here too.
Oh, great, yeah. So even though you might not have a lot of room to plant a large area, do a small area, and you'll be surprised at the things that will come to it. Every tiny little patch that you plant adds to the wealth that these creatures need to survive. And there's more than just butterflies, that need these plants. There's all of our little native pollinators. Birds need the seeds from a lot of these plants. They also need the caterpillars that are growing on some of these plants, and we'll discuss that too. So you may not really think that your garden is a critical ecological spot, but it can be. You can make it that way. It might not be if you have nothing but non-natives planted in it, then it's kind of a moot point, except that you might like the flowers. But if you put things in there that are going to host native plants, then you are making an impact whether you realize it or not. And our pollinators, because they've evolved with these native plants, these are what our pollinators need. All that alien stuff that you bring in, if you say, wow, nothing's eating my butterfly bush, and the reason nothing's eating your butterfly bush is because it's a non-native invasive bush, and it's like giving your kid a candy bar for breakfast. You might be happy for a while, but in the long run, it's not going to do them any good. So if we grow native plants, then we can do good things for all of the creatures pictured here. Whether it's a goldfinch eating the seeds from your echinacea or from your gray-headed coneflower, or hummingbirds who are certain pollinators, like royal catchfly, which is the red flower it's got its face in here. Royal catchfly and red lobelia are two plants that are pollinated only by hummingbirds. So if you really want to help hummingbirds out, get things like that to put in your garden. And that hairy wild petunia, although it's low, it is tubular, so therefore the hummingbirds like it too. And of course there's a monarch pictured here on a blazing star, and then we've got butterfly weed with a bumblebee on it. So these native plants, they're providing habitat. And habitat is a wonderful thing. It's something that everybody needs. We all need our own habitat. The insects need it, all the wildlife needs a habitat of some sort. And the nice thing too about native plants, if you get the right native plant to put in the right spot, they don't need any extra care. They don't need a lot of fertilizer. You don't have to go out and water them. We just got through a drought here down in my area. I think it had been like 6 weeks since we had any rain. And I did not go out and water my plants. I looked at them every day and felt sad because some of them were getting really wilty. But I did not, because they have to be able to withstand this, and most native plants can handle it. If you have them in the right place, they're going to be fine. And they're natural to their ecosystem, so if you've got them in the right place, they're going to do everything they need to do, and they're going to help us keep our biological diversity. And diversity is very important. I don't know if any of you have ever heard about the Irish potato famine. And that's one of my favorite illustrations for the reason we should all have a biologically diverse universe. In the 1830s and 40s, the potatoes were introduced into Ireland. And those potatoes came originally from 2 potatoes. So they were genetically the same. There was no genetic diversity. When a disease broke out in Ireland, it killed the entire potato crop all across the entire country. And so what you had then was a lot of people who had been depending on a certain thing for food source, and now they have nothing. And so for me, that's a real cautionary tale for everything that we think of. We should never think that it's okay to have undiverse biology. We need to have genetically diverse plants in our gardens. So I think gardeners ought to plant more native species because, number one, they cost less. They save you a lot of time in maintenance, a lot of money. They save water, as I just mentioned, because you don't have to keep watering them. They're suited for Ohio. They can deal with whatever Mother Nature throws at them. You don't need to use fertilizers, and certainly not pesticides. Because if you put pesticides on them, then you're essentially cutting off the reason that you're growing them in the first place, because you want all those insects to host on them. I have a Ohio Department of Agriculture fellow who comes to the nursery all the time, and some of these people, I think, not to bash anyone, but some of these people I think are a little behind in the way that they think. And this young man comes to my nursery, and he always writes on his pink slip that I have worms, caterpillars eating my plants that are in my sales area. And I just always look at him like year after year he does this, and year after year I just smile at him and say, isn't that nice? I'm helping the pollinators. Because it somehow has not sunk in on him. I don't use pesticides at the nursery. So yes, there are going to be little tiny green inchworms eating some of my plants. There's going to be American lady caterpillars on my pearly everlasting. There's going to be Io caterpillars. There's going to be all kinds of caterpillars all over everything, and I don't care. That's the whole reason I'm growing those plants. But for some people, it still is lost on them that this is an important thing that we need to do. And also, when you're putting in natives, you can control stormwater, you can filter your water, and it helps control erosion. So it's all a good thing. So, I don't know how many of you might have heard of Dumptalamy, but I wanted to give, I wanted to give Dumptalamy a shout out and give a little bit of his research. This man has done so much really great research on the uses of native plants by Lepidoptera, by pollinators, and this is a slide that talks a little bit about some of the things he's found. Just an oak tree, just species of oaks, give us a chance to grow 534 different species of caterpillars, whether it's a moth caterpillar or a butterfly caterpillar. Can you imagine? I mean, that is a lot. And if you all like songbirds, which I'm pretty sure you do, those caterpillars are important to the songbirds because that's what they feed their babies. Think of a caterpillar as a protein-filled gooey bag, and mama's going to snatch it off a tree or a plant and take it to the babies and feed them. And that is what they feed their insects. They feed them insects and caterpillars. And if we lose all these caterpillars that host on these native plants, trees included, then we will lose our songbirds. And I can't even imagine waking up in the morning and not hearing a bird song. That just seems ridiculous. So anyway, I really wanted to make sure that people understood how important the work Doug has been doing. And he's been giving a voice to all the non-scientists like me who felt like I knew something was going on, but I really could not articulate it. I didn't have the scientific background to do the research. Doug did, and here it is. And so prunus species, when you're thinking about cherries and plums, they support 456 different species of caterpillar. And that's just 2 different types of trees. Just think what the other ones are also adding to.
Doug Tellamy was actually at Lakeside two summers ago and spoke. And I heard that they're trying to get him to come back. So if you're interested in this work and live around the area, keep your eyes peeled for him coming to Lakeside again.
Oh, he's a wonderful speaker, and I end up selling plants at events that he's speaking at, but I never get to go in and listen to him. So I had to hit a conference from the Michigan Wildflower Association in Michigan in March so that I'd be able to hear Doug speak because I was never inside the building when he was talking.
He was amazing.
He really is. His slideshows are just beautiful. So I wanted to talk a little bit about just one thing like dogwood. So a lot of people like the Coosa dogwood. It's been touted as a really great hardy substitute for flowering dogwood. But you know what? None of our native insects use it. So what's the point? You know, we can have it there and maybe it is pretty, but look at that lower picture. That's our flowering dogwood. Okay, so maybe it doesn't live as long, but wouldn't you rather support as much wildlife as you can? While you have that tree in your landscape, you can always replant. And it supports 117 species of moths and butterflies, where the Coosa dogwood doesn't do a thing for any of them. So this is also some important information that I uploaded from Wild Ones, and this is more of Doug Tallamy's work. And I think the numbers speak for themselves. When you're thinking about, you know, what you should have in your yard or how you can help different pollinators. And it just amazes me that you can put all of these in your landscape, support this many different creatures, and this is just Lepidoptera. So this is just butterflies and moths. This is not all of the other pollinators like our little tiny mason bees and orchard bees. This doesn't even address that. It just addresses the Lepidoptera. And this is a success story for me, for my nursery, and so it's kind of become one of my little poster children. This is the giant swallowtail butterfly. It's a gorgeous butterfly. It's the biggest butterfly in Ohio. Absolutely gorgeous. You can see it with its wings spread out. It's beautiful black and gold. And then in the lower picture, it's on swamp milkweed, and you get a little bit of a glimpse. It looks a little bit like a tiger swallowtail when you're looking at it with its wings folded up. But the snaky looking thing on the top, that is the caterpillar. And the caterpillars are really interesting because when they first hatch out of their little eggs, they look like bird feces. I mean, what better way to keep a bird from eating you than to look like excrement from said bird? So they look like bird poop. And as they get bigger and bigger, they start to elongate and they start to look a little bit like a snake. So they have what appears to be a big head. If you upset them, they have these red things, which I always forget what they're called, that come out of the top of their head and waggle like a snake's tongue. And they emit a really stinky smell. So that's enough to usually deter anything from wanting to eat it. But this particular gorgeous butterfly is very uncommon in Ohio, or becoming more uncommon. And you might ask why? It's because the 2 species, only 2, that it hosts on are disappearing from the state. As more and more people clean out fence rows, you know, these big farmers that are farming hundreds and hundreds of acres, they're cleaning out the fence rows, so they're taking the prickly ash out, which prickly ash is a very not user-friendly bush. It's very prickly. It's not really an ash, it's a member of the citrus family. but it's one of the favorites, there's only two, of this butterfly. So when you take that out and you remove the host plant, you're gonna lose the butterfly because it's got nowhere to lay its eggs. Wafer ash is also not an ash, also a member of the citrus family, but it gets its name from the little wafers, which are the little circular things. I think they kind of look like a pillow with fringe. Those are the seeds. And this also is called hop tree because back in the early days of Ohio, our early settlers used it as hops to brew beer. So, anyway, these two trees and shrubs are becoming more and more hard to find, and as they become harder and harder for us to find, they're also harder and harder for this gorgeous butterfly to find. If you go down in Florida, you're going to see a lot of this butterfly because of all the citrus groves. And it will host on other members of the citrus family, so the oranges and the limes and the lemons, it's fine on those, but up here in Ohio, you don't see a whole lot of people growing oranges. And so these two trees, which are the native trees that this butterfly evolved on, these are what we need to be planting if we want to keep this butterfly in the state of Ohio. And everybody makes a fuss about monarchs. I get it. They're interesting, they migrate, they've got a cool story, but these other butterflies need our help too. And we can't just ignore the fact that these are disappearing. So here's another butterfly I wanted to introduce you to, and this is the American painted lady butterfly. It hosts on plant-and-leaf pussy toes, also on a plant called Pearly Everlasting, which is state listed as potentially threatened in Ohio. Oh wait, I take that back. I think they believe it's been extirpated from the state. Extirpated means they haven't found any new populations in a certain number of years. So this is one that, because I'm planting these plants at the nursery, I find them all over the place at my place. But that's, if you grow it, if you plant it, they will come. And so this is another cute little butterfly that if we don't keep the plants that it depends on around, it's going to be gone, and we won't see it either. We had a bumper crop of them this year. I tried to take plants to sales that didn't have any caterpillars on them, and every time I ended up with caterpillars at the plant sale, which makes a great selling point to make them buy more plants. You know, don't just buy one, you got to feed this guy, so you got two. But the point is I was trying not to take all my butterflies away, and I still ended up dragging them around the state. So some more plants that you might want to think about as far as plants that really have a lot of use for natives. Yellow giant hyssop is one. And this is probably not one of the prettiest flowers you've ever seen in your life. But if you plant a hyssop, whether it's the yellow giant or the anise hyssop or the blue giant hyssop, they have a lot of nectar. And so these are great plants to put in the landscape. Even though the flower may not get you all excited, it gets the pollinators excited. And for me, that's what I'm doing this for. So it's a bold, big plant. It can go 7 foot tall if it's really happy. So you want to make sure you have it in the back of a flower bed. But even our non-native honeybees love it, as well as all these native bees and the butterflies. And common blue violets, I don't know how many times I've heard people say, oh my gosh, I don't want to put a violet in my flower bed. They don't stay put. They go everywhere. They're in the lawn. Oh, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with having violets in your lawn? You know, violets are a great plant. They're a good ground cover. And when we're thinking about plants that have other uses, this is a plant you can eat. So you can eat the leaves, you can eat the flowers of violets, and so can fritillaries. So if you're planting it, you're not only planting something you can utilize, but you're planting something that those pretty little fritillary butterflies are going to utilize as well. And I have a list here of those butterflies. And there are more. This is just enough, I thought. But there are so many native violets here in Ohio that you could plant. And so if there's a spot that you want to put a violet, I'm sure there's a violet that would be happy there. And wild geranium, this is one that a lot of people really get excited about. I like wild geranium. It's a beautiful plant. It can do sun, it can do shade. It's a perennial. It's a great plant. And I can't keep it in stock when I have it at the nursery. It's very easy to cultivate, very easy to grow, very low maintenance. It can, as I said, do sun or shade. And it attracts a wide variety of different kinds of bees, and also hosts bridled arches, budworm moths, leaf roller moths, and tobacco budworm moth. Yay. So I've never seen one of those yet, or at least if I saw it, I didn't recognize it. But I try to do research on all these plants when I start growing them so that I know what to expect. Ohio spiderwort, this is one of those plants that people either love it or they hate it. And there's a lot of reasons to love it. I understand people who say, oh my gosh, and I've heard people actually say this is an invasive plant. Okay, invasive is a word reserved for non-native plants. If it's a native, it might be aggressive, it might be opportunistic, but I would never call it aggressive or invasive. This is a wonderful plant though, and you know you can eat this too. You can use it as a pot herb. And spiderwort is something that they plant around uranium plants to check for leaks. So if you've got a leak at a uranium plant and you have this plant planted around the building, the flowers are going to change color. So that's how they tell that there is a leak. So it's kind of cool. The story is cool. This is also a plant that does not provide any nectar, only pollen. So when the bees visit it, they get pollen, but no butterflies, nobody's going to get nectar from this plant. But it's beautiful. If you have a big mass of this, it's just gorgeous. For some reason, it wanted to move on. I don't want to do that. So, and you can see too, in the foreground, there's a really pale colored spiderwort, and there's a lot of color variation in this plant in the wild. And a good portion of my genetic material came from Marion County, from the prairies in Marion County. And so I went to different prairie remnants just looking at those plants and collecting seed from scattered bits and pieces of plants just so I could try to get the most genetic diversity that I could. And I have it in my prairie. It's just beautiful. When you come in to the nursery like late May, early June, it's like an ocean out there with little pops of lavender or almost white or violet. This is another one of those great plants that people don't give enough respect, I think. This is one that a long time ago women used to have in their flower beds. And this blooms at the same time as the spiderwort, so it really makes a nice pairing. But this is one, in the old days you saw it in almost everybody's flower bed. But nowadays it's kind of, you know, it's not at the garden center, so you're not going to usually have it unless you visit a native plant nursery. But this is indigenous to the eastern United States. There's one out in the Midwest, more in the Midwest, it's called prairie sundrops, which is hairy, but it's pretty similar to this. This is a wonderful plant, and the color is just really vivid. Now, milkweeds, we've all heard about monarchs and milkweeds. And if I was going to plant a milkweed in a flower bed, common milkweed would not be my choice. For the simple reason is that it doesn't stay put. It likes to move around. I think its whole goal is world domination. So if you plant common milkweed, it's going to look nice for a year or so, and then it's going to start exploring, and before you know it, you're going to have common milkweed everywhere. That's, if you've got the space, that's not a bad thing. But, you know, it is a host plant for monarchs. And for a long time, I heard a lot of noise from some of the butterfly groups saying that it was the very best plant for monarchs. As a person who grows about 10 different species of milkweeds, I disagree. Because the butterflies have their choice of where they want to lay their eggs at my nursery. And I see them pretty universally over all the milkweeds. So it's not like they're picking this one. And I think the reason that a lot of people have said common milkweed is the place or the plant to have, is because the leaves are big and you can feed more caterpillars with one leaf. But trust me, those butterflies will figure it out and they'll move their eggs around. Most monarchs actually only lay one egg per plant because they want to make sure there's enough food for the little baby that's going to hatch. So when you find more than one caterpillar on a milkweed, that's because more than one butterfly came along and laid one egg. And this is, if you can't tell, if you haven't ever learned how to sex a butterfly, here's your chance. This is a male, and you know how you tell it's a male. You can see these tiny little glands. See if I can get up here and point them out. They're right there. You see those little tiny black dots? Those are glands that tell you that's a male butterfly. That's a male monarch. So the females will not have that little teardrop-shaped black spot on its hind wings. That's always good to know, right? You want to know what your butterflies are. So here's a monarch just recently come out of its chrysalis, and then of course there's the caterpillar. And I think education on this is so important. I had a woman come to the nursery a couple years ago, and she was all excited about wanting to help the monarchs, right? So she was thrilled that she found a nursery that had pesticide-free milkweeds. I fixed her up with a bunch of milkweeds, and so she took them home and she planted them. And the next year she came back, and I remembered her, and I said, "Oh, how did your project go? You know, did you see a lot of monarchs?" And she said, "No, I didn't." And I was hurt, and I said, "Oh my gosh, you know, I'm so sorry. Do you have any idea what happens?" And she said, "No." She said, "I had all these little stripy worms on the plants, and I killed them because I thought they would scare off the monarchs."
Oh my God. Oh my word.
And that was when Gale said, "I better start putting a picture of the caterpillar on the sheet because of the plant." Because here's this woman who, her whole thing was to try to help the monarch, but then she saw the green stripy worms that got on the plants and decided they were bad, and she killed them, and then couldn't understand why she didn't see monarchs.
You'd think she would have researched that a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean,
Most
if they
people
would
would
not
go from egg
I mean,
to a butterfly.
she only thought if you bought the plant, they would come, but she didn't know that they
Well, they look like
she didn't know anything about metamorphosis, apparently.
Evidently not.
Oh my God.
So these are things that I try to make sure that I point out nowadays, because I really, if I had known that woman had no idea what a monarch caterpillar looked like, I would have made sure that I pointed some out to her so she understood. As a matter of fact, I have a great grandson who comes to my house. He calls them rainbow worms.
Yeah.
So if he wants to call him a rainbow worm, that's okay, because then he thinks rainbows are a good thing. So he won't. Hopefully, he's 4. He won't think about squishing them. And then this is what happens at the nursery. So
And that's butterfly weed.
that is butterfly weed, yes. And it used to be butterfly weed before it got covered with a whole bunch of monarch caterpillars. And because I don't use any pesticides, I just have to resign myself to giving this tray of plants up to the monarchs. Because, well, they've made it home. You know, that's not what you're going to do with it. So you can see I don't squish any stripy worms, no matter what. And this particular flat of plants was minus one plant in the tray. So it had 31 plants in it and over 40 caterpillars in this one tray of 31 tiny little butterfly weeds. So they just like, this is really, I think, what the mama monarchs are looking for. Tender young plants that will be good food for their babies. And so, boy, I get a kick out of this picture every time I look at it, because it's so wonderful to be able to see this many monarch caterpillars. I know I'm helping a lot of butterflies here, and it's just something we have to remember, is that maybe they might damage the plant if you get this many. And maybe that plant won't make it, but it was worth it because you helped this now endangered butterfly. The other thing you might find on your milkweed is milkweed tussock moths. And I kind of think they look like a little throw pillow.
They look like something out of Alice in Wonderland or something. They're so weird.
The interesting thing about the tussock moths is that when they lay their eggs, they lay a huge clutch of them. So you'll see 100 or more of these little caterpillars all over the plants. And talk about doing some damage to a plant. But it's one of the only things here in Ohio that you're going to find on a milkweed besides a monarch. That's a moth or a butterfly. Because you'll see milkweed beetles and milkweed bugs. And those awful yellow aphids. But this is the only other moth that I know of that hosts on it. And then there's false blue indigo. You know, there's so many really great plants that you can have in your landscape. And this is one that for many years they thought was extirpated from the state of Ohio. And I mentioned extirpation earlier. This is a plant that had once been found in the prairies in Adams County, and then it disappeared. Well, fortunately for all of Ohio, the Hamilton County Park District, which is the district in the Cincinnati area, had gone to these prairies many, many years before, collected some seed, and got this plant started in the Hamilton County Park District parks. And so the plant was not completely lost, which was good for me because I got seed from the Hamilton County Park District so that I could grow this plant as well. But it's a beautiful plant. It's found a lot further out west, like you'll find this plant in other places, but here in Ohio, there was just a few places where it actually grew. And it's a host plant for the wild indigo dusky wing and some skippers and then some of the sulfur butterflies as well, because it's a legume, so the sulfurs often feed on legumes. But it's a great plant, and it's just such a beautiful color of blue. And then here's the wild indigo dusky wing. He's kind of cute. He looks like a little slug with a black head. The little butterfly is not a whole lot to look at, but it's still important ecologically. And then Lanceleaf coreopsis, this is one of my faves, and you've got it out here in the flower bed. I love this plant, but this is one that for me is hard to get the seed from because the goldfinches like it too. And so they're hitting that seed as hard as they can as soon as it's ready. But it's beautiful, it's colorful, it's got great nectar and pollen. Don't ever fall for the double flowered ones at the garden center though, because the loss of pollen and nectar is what you traded for that double flower. Anytime you have a flower that's got a double flower, you've lost the pollen and nectar from it because that was the trade-off to get all those extra petals. Whether they meant it or not, that's what happened. And then this is the wavy-lined emerald, and I chose this one to show you because the caterpillar, that's the caterpillar on the flower down below, they decorate themselves with pieces of flower petal. So they're, you know, the wavy-lined emerald moth itself is gorgeous. It's not a huge moth, but it's really pretty. And the caterpillar is almost unrecognizable because it's always got itself covered with little bits of flower petals. And so that's how it camouflages itself from the birds.
That appeared because of I had never seen one here before, and a couple times they've been on the front doors when we've gone to leave, just the moths kind of just hanging out there.
Oh, nice.
So it's really cool. Now I know what they're hosting on.
Yeah, you know where the babies are. The
Yeah.
babies are sitting on those Lanceleaf coreopsis. And then, of course, we had a little bit of a discussion before this on the purple coneflower. And this is just a wonderful plant. It's great for long-tongued bees and butterflies. Now, and that's a distinction you may not really have ever thought about. How long was a bee's tongue? But there are some bees that have long tongues, like a bumblebee. And then there are some bees that have little tiny short stubby tongues, like the little orchard bees. And then there's the honeybee, who is in the middle. So he's on the short end of the long-tongued bees. But flowers are important. You know, if you're a bee, your tongue can only go where it can reach. And so you have to have the right flowers to be able to get the nectar and the pollen. And then, of course, goldfinches love this plant as well, so they like the seeds. And then butterflies, here's some examples of some of the butterflies you might see. Viceroys, which look very much like a little tiny monarch, except that you'll see they have an extra black line in that hind wing. And then there's the great spangled fritillary, and our painted ladies love these too. And there's a couple blazing stars that look very similar, and I'm going to show you both of them. There are several, I think there's like 5 or 6 different species of blazing star that's native here in Ohio. And prairie blazing star is generally one of the ones you find in the prairies in more southern Ohio. And then there's the spiked blazing star, or dense blazing star, that you find up in this area. And that's what we have planted up here, is dense blazing star in the beds here.
If you went by over the summer and saw 6-foot tall things that look like that.
Yeah.
The dense blazing star.
Mine fall over.
They did now, yeah.
Yeah,
they did.
mine will fall over if you don't have anything else up against it.
Yeah, if you've got a way to stake it or other plants that can help kind of bolster it,
Yeah.
sometimes they will. That flower head gets really heavy when they
It
go
does.
crazy. But this is a
It starts
nice
at the
plant.
bottom and works its way up.
It's a good plant to have in the landscape. Goldfinches like it, so it's one that you can leave up and let the goldfinches pick off the seeds as they ripen. And that's always another one that I'm battling the goldfinches for who gets the seed. Yeah, this is deer resistant. This is one that I've never seen any deer browse on the blazing star. So now this is dense blazing star, the other spiky one. And the one that we have planted up here is dense blazing star from the lakeside area. And that specific genetic material does these long flower spikes that are like 3 foot long, and they get curly and just do all kinds of wacky things. And I thought it was important if I was bringing flowers up here to make sure that they got the right genetics for this area. So it's a really great plant, beautiful plant. Maybe they'll let you have some seed from them so you can plant some. It is a wonderful, wonderful plant. And again, this is one that the long-tongued butterflies really like, the skippers like it, and also day-flying moths and bee flies like it too. And the goldfinches can't get enough seed. Hoary mountain mint, I'm going into the mountain mints now. I love the mountain mints. I think the nursery right now, we're up to 5, 6, 7 different species of mountain mint that grow in Ohio. And this is one of my favorites because of the way the top of the plant looks like somebody took white spray paint and just kind of painted over the top. But on this plant, you will see things that are pollinators that you had absolutely no idea were pollinators. It attracts the wackiest assortment of insects. And it's just really interesting to go out there and see who's on it today, because there are bugs on there that'll be on there that you would have never thought would be visiting a flower. And I've been experimenting with some of these mountain mints, and I had a foraging event at the nursery last weekend. I do every 3rd weekend in September. And so I made cheesecake using hairy mountain mint as the seasoning, and that turned out really well. Although my cheesecake was just a very pale yellowish green because I had to boil the mountain mint in the milk to make the cheesecake, but still, it was pretty good. And so I'm working to learn more about using these plants in recipes. But this is one of my favorites just because of the way it looks. And it has a very peppery, minty smell to it. And this is what it looks like in a flower bed. I mean, that's just absolutely gorgeous when you see a mass of it like.
I don't know why it wants to.
I don't either.
Jump.
There. It's just getting over anxious, I
Yeah.
guess. Anyway, I absolutely love this mountain mint. And here it's paired with showy coneflower. And this is Virginia mountain mint. And these are some of those critters that when I first looked at it, I went, those are pollinators? What? Virginia mountain mint is a great smelling plant too. All the mountain mints have a wonderful smell except for thin leaf mountain mint or slender leaf mountain mint. It has no scent whatsoever, which I find very interesting considering that it's a mint and almost all mints have some kind of particular odor. But the Virginia mountain mint, this is a really nice plant. At the nursery, we have some that smells like lemon, kind of citrusy. And I found it at a prairie remnant in Marion County. And so I brought a little bit of the seed home, and now I have that smell in my, I like to sniff my plants, I'm sorry, you know. And when I'm collecting seed, I always have to get the seed up to my face and breathe in deeply because a lot of these are so aromatic. And then this is a little cluster of Virginia mountain mint. It just really is a pretty plant. But this one is a true mint. When you think about mints as moving around a lot and going places you might not want them to go, this is one that will do that on you. Where the hoary mountain mint does not. It stays more in a clump and is better behaved. Then there's the gray-headed coneflower. Beautiful plant. It's kind of leggy, so when you put it in your landscape, you might want to have some other things kind of around the base of it, just because it's very thin and wispy. But the flowers are beautiful. It gets up there, it waves in the breeze. It's just a nice plant. And the goldfinches really, really like the plant. Anything that's a seed-eating bird is going to hit it, but I see the goldfinches on it right now, this time of year. And there's several images of one. Oh. The goldfinch is caught in the act. of stealing seed. And then there's a photo of the prairie that's got some blazing star and the gray-headed coneflower in bloom back behind it. And then you can see the seed head there, and that gives you an idea of like how the seed is dispersed on there. Every one of those little cubbies on there might not have seed in it, but that's what the goldfinch is going for, is all that, whatever seed they can find on it. And they just tear the seed heads up trying to get to the seed that is there. This is one that if you put it in your garden, it's gonna be a great conversation starter. And this is another plant that Native Americans have uses for. There was a pair of sandals found in a cave in Kentucky, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago by some archaeologists, that was made from the leaves of rattlesnake master. And they said that those sandals were in such good shape, you could have put them on and worn them out of the cave. They just had held up that well, and they were 1,000 years old, they estimated at the time. So this is a really cool plant. It's a great cordage plant. If you come to my 14 event, we'll teach you how to make rope out of it. But this is a really nifty plant, and it actually attracts a parasitic wasp that people say it's a good thing to have that parasitic wasp around your garden, because it will lay its eggs on tomato hornworms and then kill the little parasites will kill your hornworms. But it's a really cool plant, and that is actually, the flowers look like that, and then it stays in this spiny ball when it goes into seed. It's another one of those that we clean the seed with a jar full of rocks. So we don't want to get our hands all pokey. And turtlehead, this is another one that hummingbirds just absolutely love. So hummers come to it. This is one that is found pretty much all over the state of Ohio. Ruby-throated hummingbird is a huge fan. And the Baltimore checker spot butterfly, which is undergoing some reintroduction here in Ohio, is a host on this. So we have a couple of places, a couple of park districts, like 5 Rivers Metro Parks, that are working on butterfly reintroduction projects, and they're using this to be the host for that Baltimore checker spot butterfly. And there's the Baltimore checker spot, in case you've never seen one. It's a beautiful butterfly. And the other place that's working on a reintroduction of them is High Banks Metro Parks down by Columbus. Blue wood aster. This is one of my favorite asters that's just starting to bloom right now. Little tiny blue flowers. It's like a fluffy cloud. It's like a cloud just landed on the ground. And it's just full. It blooms late in the season, so it'll hold its bloom for a long time. And it's just such a pretty plant. But it also is such a great plant for late season pollen for so many insects. And the silvery checker spot and the pearl crescent butterfly feed on asters. So anytime you have asters planted, you're helping those little butterflies. And here's the silvery checker spot. We have so many silvery checker spots at the nursery this year. We had so many that whenever you would walk out of our potting building, we water our plants on the carts before we put them in the greenhouse out in front of the building. And so the soil is always damp right there, and it's part of the driveway, so it's gravel. And when you would walk out of the building, there would be all these tiny little checker spots puddling in that area. And you walk out, and it's just like this cloud of butterflies erupts all over the place. And then they're fluttering all around your legs. It almost feels like they're doing a dance. It's one of the more fun things about working out there in the summertime, is just getting to see all these little butterflies. And then this is tall boneset, also known as thoroughwort. And this is one of those plants that if you see it alongside of the road, you may not really appreciate it. You've got a beautiful patch of it here. Yeah. And this is a great plant. It's a wonderful late season nectar and pollen plant for butterflies, and you can see how much monarchs really love this plant. But it's also a host for several moth species. And this one, you might wonder about how some of these plants get their names. The boneset family got their name because when the early explorers came here, they found native people using these plants to make analgesic teas. So if a person broke their bones, to reduce the fever and help the bone to mend, native people would make a tea out of the leaves of this plant. hence the name bone set. I think it's really interesting. I mean, there's so many of these species that gets their name from the way they were being used when the early explorers found the Indians using them. Stiff goldenrod, this is one of those plants that have a huge flower cluster. The flowers are pretty big themselves, and then you've got this massive cluster. You can see how big it is compared to the monarch up there. And when you see it in bloom, it could be, the whole top of it could be covered with honeybees, or any kind of bee, or a whole diversity of different kinds of bees and moths and butterflies. But this is one of the better butterfly plants. If you're gonna plant a goldenrod, this is one that's really great to have. It's a little big for some people because it can go 5 foot or more, but it still is a great plant to have, and it smells great. It smells really good. Black-eyed Susans. A lot of times when you see a black-eyed Susan, or what's called a black-eyed Susan in a garden center, it's actually orange coneflower. The black-eyed Susan is a cuter name. So they're both in the Rudbeckia family. So a lot of times the garden centers, and most of the time the people don't even realize that what they're selling as black-eyed Susan isn't truly a black-eyed Susan. But black-eyed Susan generally is more of an annual to a biennial plant. So this is one that you might get it started and it's going to grow. If it blooms one year, it's not coming back the next year. So you want to let it go to seed and have the seed fall, and then you'll have plenty of it. But this is also a good host plant. And then here's the Gorgon checker spot, which is one of the little butterflies that hosts on the Rudbeckias. Arrow-leaved violet. This is one of my favorites as far as the violets go. This little guy can do full sun. So when you think about a violet, most of the time we think of violets in the shade, but an arrow-leaved violet can handle full sun. It's got these really cool arrow-shaped leaves, so it's easy to distinguish from any other violet around. What I've seen at the nursery is they don't seem to cross either, so this guy seems to be able to hold its own genetics. There's a lot of times when you're growing more than one species, and they're in the same genus, then they'll cross. They kind of trade genetic material. I see that with prairie violet and common blue violet a lot. But this guy is just absolutely adorable. I love the leaves, and I love the fact that it can do full sun. And then here's the prairie violet that I just mentioned. And you can see how those leaves are kind of divided. When that violet crosses with common, you might get leaves that look like common on the plant. Even though you pulled the seed from a prairie violet and you know darn well it's supposed to be a prairie violet, it might come out with the leaves like a common violet. And then that's when you know there was some hanky-panky going on there with the pollinators. But you can't tell the pollinators what flowers to go to, so you just have to deal with whatever they choose to do. But this also is a wonderful host plant and also does great in full sun. And this is one of those violets that they believe has been extirpated from the state of Ohio as well. And I feel really fortunate that years ago I met a fellow who used to work for ODNR, and that was before people were really paying close attention to what was state listed or what was becoming more and more rare. And this guy happened to have collected some seed and brought it back to his place, and then he shared this genetic material with me. So I don't want anybody to think that I'm going out and robbing any wild populations in a preserve. I round these up in various ways, many ways, but I never go out to a preserve and do any seed collection, and neither should any of you. Go to a native plant nursery, go to someone where you can legally obtain the plants. And then this is the variegated fritillary. I think the caterpillar is really cute on this one. It's very attractive. Now, the butterfly's not ugly either, but it's just interesting to see some of the things that will host on the violets. And if you find these caterpillars on a violet, count yourself lucky. Because I watch my violets all the time, and I'll see that they've been chewed up, but I never catch them with the caterpillar
I was just thinking, I find holes in my violet leaves all the time, and I've never found a single caterpillar that I could see.
I hardly ever see them. But they're there. And then sawtooth sunflower. This is one, I have one right now at the nursery, that I have this potting building that's, I don't know, I suppose it's at least 12 foot tall at the peak. And it's taller than the potting building this year. So they get really big. The goldfinches do love them. The butterflies love them. They're a host plant for checker spots.
Yeah, I got those out.
And,
Add
This
them.
is one that if you've got it, you're gonna have goldfinches everywhere, because the goldfinches absolutely love the seeds from the sunflowers. And this is my jungle, with a lot of the sunflowers, and,
Oh, there it goes again.
I don't think it likes that slide.
yeah,
It's like done it every time we've had that type of slide.
I wonder why, huh? Yeah, so this is, all right, we're gonna do this one more time. This particular slide is of an area in my Okay, it's an area in my prairie where I put a lot of really tall things. And so it has hollow joe pie, sawtooth sunflower, and just a lot of the really big, massive plants. So we call it the jungle. Anyway, Golden Alexander, this is my, I believe, my next to the last slide. So Golden Alexander is a host plant for the woodland black swallowtail butterfly. And you might find their caterpillars on your dill, on your fennel, because this one feeds on parsley, members of the parsley family, and they're not so particular that they won't eat something that's not native. So they're one of the few native Ohio butterflies that will eat things that's not necessarily a native plant. But it's a great plant, Golden Alexander is, and I'm just amazed at how big yours are in the flower bed out here. I can't get over how big they are.
Because I have one at home and it's like, maybe a quarter of the size of these.
The ones out here are like super happy. You did them a solid putting them out.
Yeah, they really did.
And then this is my last slide, and I just wanted to kind of show you how beautiful spiderwort and Golden Alexander can look together, if you're still a hater on the spiderwort. So, and I have a few things that you might want to go to, some of the books that I think are really good to check out, or websites that you might find a little bit more about some of these butterflies and insect interactions. I really, really recommend Pollinators of Native Plants by Heather Holm. She's written some really great stuff about pollinators with different guides on how to replace non-native things in your garden and use native plants. So thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions at all?
Okay, so I'm sure it takes a lot to, I'm thinking about my current landscape, and I bought a few natives from you, and you're doing very well. But how do you get to that point of getting rid of the the invasive stuff? Or I heard you talking about
The English ivy,
the English
yeah.
ivy and things like that, and
You
then
just keep
start
digging at it.
integrating, and then just start integrating
Yeah,
stuff. So
Yeah, basically you just have to keep plugging away at it.
I got frustrated,
Especially in the case of
and
English
so I
ivy
keep
and
digging
things
at
like
it because
that.
I couldn't get rid of
But
it.
you don't have to make the transition all at once, just as things die,
native, so,
replace it with the
It's
native.
native because it's.
There's little ways that you can
But I'll
sneak
allow
those
it.
natives in there and that they will
It's
be
native to
fine.
the town.
And they don't mind cohabitating with the non-natives, like they're not
Sure.
fussy.
Yeah, I know.
But it's all about you and how much time you want to spend and how fast you want to make that change.
sure.
But there is also the fact that if you have native plants, say you have a deer problem, and I've experimented with some things at the nursery. So if you have a deer problem and you've got some non-natives that you really, really love, and you want to keep them, try planting some native plants around them that the deer like. Which sounds weird, but I found it to be true. In my gardens, the deer will go after the native most of the time and leave the non-native alone. So as an experiment, I have hostas planted under a sycamore tree. And ever since I put native asters around those hostas, the deer leave the hostas alone. They haven't eaten the hostas at all. And they nip off the asters, but that helps you in a way because they're keeping the asters short and bushy because they only nip the new growth off. They don't eat the whole plant, they just nip the new growth off. So that's kind of beneficial. And then you can also try things like nodding wild onion or the mint around plants that you like, that you want to keep, that the deer are bothering, because they don't like either the mint or the onions. So they evidently don't like minty fresh breath or onion breath.
Or onion breath.
So plant those around, and a lot of times they'll just stay away because they don't like those
It
plants.
looks like that. It's a house.
Yeah.
And are there some natives that don't like each other?
Oh yeah, I mean Canada goldenrod is a prime example of a plant that doesn't like anybody else. So if you have, well, that's one of the problems with Canada goldenrod, because Canada goldenrod is like a walnut tree. It creates a chemical with its roots that will effectively kill everything around it off. And so when you go past the farmer's field and you see nothing but Canada goldenrod right now, that's why, because that got started in there, they didn't maintain it, and it sent out all these runners, and these runners are all producing this chemical that keep other seeds from growing up around it. So it basically just gives that Canada goldenrod full control over everything. So there are plants like that that will just completely take over an area. If you have it, you either want to get it pulled. If it's too much to pull, just keep cutting it off because it doesn't like to be cut. And so if you keep whacking it off, you can finally get it back down to something manageable that you can cut. I used to work for Soil and Water in Morrow County, and that's what they told farmers to do when it took over a field, is just keep mowing it. Just keep mowing it, just keep working at it.
I'm just dabbling with a lot of this at my house, but obviously being a part and seeing what Brian has done here has been really cool. So if I took photos of some things that I liked, I should definitely research to make sure that they like each other.
Yeah, and some, a lot of the plants that are out on the prairie, they have different root depths, so they all use a different zone in the soil. And so like those grasses, they're going way down deep to get all the moisture, and so then the moisture is still available to the plants with shorter roots that are growing around the grasses. The one thing that you always want to watch out for too when you're doing native grasses is that they can really take over an area too. The seed falls, and some of the things like big blue stem and Indian grass, while they're really pretty, they can really fill in very quickly and just push all the flowering plants out. So anybody who's doing like a little prairie planting, I always recommend that they go very, very light on the grasses because they want to keep those forbs in there, the flowers, as long as they can.
Since we've been up here for the last 5 to 10 years, we see a lot of plants coming up that we never saw in Central Ohio. One of them I was told is Robert's geranium. I don't know if that's
Or Roberts, yeah, it's a little, I think it's non-native. I'm not sure. It makes little tiny pink
Oh, yeah, I'm not
flowers,
familiar
and it
with
has
it
these
at all.
kind of like lazy leaves, and it pops up at my house in Catawba too.
Yeah, when it
But I haven't been able to find that it's native, so I think it might be an introduced.
Yeah, I'm not
seed.
familiar with it at all.
Yeah.
But when you've got human habitation that's happened years and years and years and years, and then people bring in plants. That's what we do as humans. We move plants with us. We bring in something we like. I mean, that's how a lot of these non-natives got in America in the first place. The early settlers didn't know what they'd find, and so they brought things on purpose. Dandelions and plantain and things like that. I mean,
Chicory.
and chicory. Chicory was used to make coffee,
Right.
for a while.
Right.
But the plantain, when plantain first started showing up in the landscape, Native Americans called it white man's footprint, because as they saw this plant, they
That
saw.
weird little-
Oh yeah, I don't think I've ever seen that one.
They grow up here all the time. I don't know why.
So like Native Americans had never seen this plant before, and so everywhere white men went, somehow this plant showed up, and so they just started calling it white man's footprint, because they knew white men had been through the area because this plant suddenly popped up. But it had uses. The early settlers would collect the seed from it and boil it like rice and eat it. So the plantain in your yard, you can eat the seeds. They're kind of mucilaginous a little bit when they're cooked, but if you're hungry, you're hungry. And then, of course, a lot of people probably know it as a part of an antidote for poison ivy. My dad used to always crush up the leaves for that and the leaves of jewelweed and mix them together and then use them to rub on poison ivy.
I should have that. Because I grow poison ivy like crazy.
Okay. Poison ivy.
If you're on
grows
Catawba, you have
so
poison
wild.
ivy.
Oh, okay.
There is
Oh, yeah.
that's native to
Right,
Catawba.
here.
It's
Okay.
just all over the place. But I have a lot of black walnut, okay? So there's a lot of things.
There are a lot of plants that are tolerant of black walnut that have.
Could you tell me what they are?
Actually, the wild geranium, I believe, was
Okay,
one.
all right.
I know I had a couple of them marked out here that were.
Well, and
But if
I
you-
wasn't reading everything. I was writing all these down and I was just wondering.
If you email me
Okay.
email me and I will send you a list of plants that are black walnut tolerant.
Well, because, I was wondering, because I was sort of writing a lot of the flowers that you have done in the natives, and I was wondering, are there some that maybe, you know, the prairie ones that maybe wouldn't do very well up here?
As far as I know, a lot of the prairie ones, there was some prairie areas that were up in northern Ohio.
Yeah.
So I don't see any reason why a lot of them probably wouldn't.
As long as you don't have trees.
We'll
It's
try
more
that.
about how much sun are they gonna get and.
Yeah, see, that's just it, that's another thing, the backyard is almost
All shade.
all shade.
So if you know, you should
And
definitely.
what are not black walnut I have a lot of different oaks in the yard.
You
And
should-
basically that's what's my yard.
Just look for plants that are shade tolerant. There are some of the prairie plants that grow underneath other prairie plants, and so they're more shade tolerant, obviously. But you just kinda have to watch each individual
In
plant.
the front yard I have quite a bit of,
Yeah.
sun.
So the wild geranium often is found on prairies. And some of my wild geranium came from the Trello-Romine Prairie in Marion County, but it also is considered a woodland plant, so it can handle the shade.
And the other thing is, cause I've been wondering this, when you go to the nurseries, I mean, you know, in the box stores and stuff that are selling stuff, why do they make it that they can only sell stuff that's native? I mean, why do they sell the stuff that they sell?
Because they don't have that kind of regulation, I mean, it's not, they can't do that. I mean, as far as I know legally, they can't. The only thing they can do is if they declare something invasive, then they can tell the garden centers and the nurseries that they can't sell it, like, calorie pear. But the problem is all these people have spent money and they have it in stock, and so they always have to give them time to unload their inventory, you know, so they're not losing all kinds of
Because I
money.
mean, I've been researching like some of the bushes and the different, the trees and things, and you go and buy them, and then you find out, well, these are not great to have, like, you know.
Well, I think, not to interrupt, but I think from my experience, like growing up in gardening, it took a couple of people that were a little more knowledgeable about natives that got me kind of started into it, because I grew up planting just traditional perennials and
Well,
things,
yeah.
and none of them were native, you know?
Right.
And the biggest transition was Doug telling me, I heard him say, if nothing's eating your garden, you're not part of the ecosystem, and my brain sort of blew up, and I became a completely different gardener, but it's, in my neighborhood, I've worked to try and get people to understand
And I like the
It's
perennials that you
difficult.
plant in the ground. When I buy my annuals are in pots, and they're not in the ground, because for one thing, I'm not gonna go out there every day. Well, I have to go out every day and water because they're in pots, because it doesn't hold water. But I do like color and stuff, but I do know, I wanna have some stuff in, and I noticed that when I tried to go a little bit, the one section out front native, it really looks messy and crappy. But like I said, the coneflower and stuff, now, I'm sure I must have bought that at a regular, maybe Barnes or somewhere, wherever. But you know what I mean, saying, I try not, I've tried different things that don't grow around the black walnuts. I will tell you that my hosta, there was a hosta when I got there, and I've split that, and mainly, all my hostas are pretty much from one plant. And I might have got a couple others, and then the variegated ones, Mom gave me some. The deer don't eat my hostas because sometimes, I don't know, they kill the deer on its hour. But I also plant daffodils, and deer eat tulips, but they don't eat daffodils.
Yeah, I can't.
They haven't eaten mine. They don't come over, nothing has bothered my hostas, other than maybe they're not in as shady, because some can take shade and some can't, and so they start withering and stuff. But, the bees and the butterflies like the hosta flowers, so I do.
Yeah, well, there's no reason to keep some, there's no reason not to keep some of the non-natives that you like. Just, I think the figures that I've heard thrown out is like 70% native, 30% non-native.
Okay.
And then that way you can balance your garden a little bit better with more things for the pollinators.
Well, like burning bush, who knew that burning bush was not a good thing to plant?
Well, when we first started planting things like burning bush, we didn't really realize, what the impact was gonna be. And that's the same way with that stupid calorie pear.
Mhm.
Like, nobody realized it was supposed to be sterile, you know, it wasn't supposed to
Yeah, it
reproduce.
grew
And
everywhere.
now you see it everywhere because it did reproduce.
But I mean,
We're all learning.
it's hard to transfer. It's like you
They're
said.
on the no-no list now.
Oh, no.
But there are some counties in the state of Ohio and different organizations that are rewarding you if you cut down calorie pear, they'll give you trees to replace it with.
Is it the tree?
It's,
It's like a Bradford pear, calorie pear.
Bradford,
yeah.
That was
Yeah.
really big, and they,
Right.
and it
They're
was
really
like,
Right.
weak limbs.
and everybody liked it because of the shape.
yeah.
It was, you know, that's why that
They
had
stink,
flowers,
too.
but it's not a pretty
The
plant.
flowers stink, ugh.
Well, the problem with my yard, besides the black walnut, and I learned to eat them, but, is our ground, cause obviously we have brought in some dirt, most of the dirt is not really good stuff, but it's really clay, it's between clay and rock and stone, and then underneath everything is natural catawba rock.
There's a lot of natives that'll grow in the clay.
Oh, there's a lot of
Yeah,
things
I
that
haven't
love that
amended
kind
much of my
environment.
soil and,
Oh, that clay is just, and
And-
when it's dry, there's cracks this
Yeah.
wide, you could fall in it.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that sounds like my house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With the cracks.
Yeah, I could throw pots with some of the dirt in my yard, I think, but, yeah, you would be surprised at how many of them will tolerate that.
You
like-
know, Emily's little Joanna loves all the bugs.
Yeah,
She just,
that's awesome.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
You too.
Thank
Thank
you everyone
you.
for
Thank
coming.
you.
I indeed will share seed with you, so if there's things that you like that are out front. I'd also, like to put a plug in for the Catawba Island Garden Club sale in the spring, because I provide them with a lot of natives that are mostly from her. So, we're passing them along, but,
I started going to it, cause I never would go to it, but it's so packed in the spring, you can't hardly get in there.
yeah.
I'm glad
Well,
they went
eventually,
into-
here, we're going to be, dividing and selling some of the natives as they grow, so we're not quite there yet, but in a few years down the road, you might find a Shores and Islands native plant sale happening too.
Yeah.